The morning sun painted the sky in soft orange hues as Dr. Amara Thompson stepped out of her sleek black sedan. She stood for a moment, taking in the breathtaking view of the Grandview Resort. Nestled against rolling hills and overlooking a pristine lake, the resort looked like something from a luxury magazine, the kind of place where business deals worth millions were made over handshakes and fine wine. Amara adjusted her blazer and smiled. This was it, the week she had been planning for months. Her production company's most important retreat yet. 15 of her top executives, 3 potential investors, and 2 major network representatives would be spending the next 7 days here. The stakes couldn't be higher. But as she walked toward the grand entrance, a familiar knot formed in her stomach. It wasn't nerves about the business meetings. She had been closing deals and running companies for over 20 years. The anxiety came from something much more personal and frustrating. 3 months earlier, Amara's world had turned upside down. What started as occasional stomach problems had escalated into something serious. After countless doctor visits and tests, she received a diagnosis that changed everything. Severe food allergies and autoimmune reactions that her body had somehow developed seemingly overnight. Her doctor explained that stress, genetics, and years of demanding work schedules had finally caught up with her. The list of foods she now had to avoid was overwhelming. Gluten, dairy, shellfish, certain nuts, specific preservatives, and even some common cooking oils could trigger reactions ranging from mild discomfort to serious health emergencies. Her doctor had been clear about this new reality. There was no room for mistakes. When Amara first received the diagnosis, she felt frustrated and scared. How was she supposed to maintain her busy lifestyle when something as simple as eating became complicated? But she was nothing if not a problem solver. She hired a nutritionist, learned to read every food label, and gradually adapted to her new normal. The resort retreat, however, presented a unique challenge. She couldn't exactly pack a week's worth of meals in her luggage. That's when she decided to be proactive. 3 weeks before the retreat, she called the resort's main number. "Grandview Resort, how may I help you today?" The voice on the other end was cheerful and professional. "Hi, I'm Dr. Amara Thompson. I have a corporate group booking for next month, and I need to discuss some dietary accommodations." "Of course. Let me transfer you to our catering department. They'll take excellent care of you." The catering manager, a woman named Janet, sounded genuinely enthusiastic when she picked up the call. "Dr. Thompson, we're so excited about your upcoming retreat. I've been looking at your group size and the event schedule. This is going to be wonderful." Amara explained her situation carefully. She didn't want to sound demanding, but she needed to be clear about how serious her dietary restrictions were. She mentioned the medical diagnosis, the specific foods she couldn't eat, and even offered to provide documentation from her doctor. "Oh my goodness, don't worry about this at all," Janet responded immediately. "We handle special dietary needs all the time. Food allergies, religious restrictions, personal preferences. We pride ourselves on making sure every guest feels completely taken care of." The conversation continued for nearly an hour. Janet asked detailed questions about Amara's restrictions, took notes about safe cooking methods, and even suggested some menu modifications that would work perfectly. She explained how their kitchen staff was trained to handle allergen-free preparation and how they could ensure no cross-contamination. "I'll personally oversee everything," Janet promised. "This is exactly the kind of challenge our team loves. We want your retreat to be perfect, and that means making sure you can enjoy every meal without any worries." Amara felt a huge wave of relief. She had been dreading this conversation, expecting to encounter resistance or indifference. Instead, she found a partner who seemed genuinely committed to helping. "I really appreciate this," Amara said. "I know, it might seem like a lot of extra work." "Are you kidding?" Janet laughed. "This is what we do. We've had guests with much more complicated needs. Last month we had a wedding where the bride was allergic to 17 different things. We created an entire separate menu just for her, and it was beautiful." Before ending the call, Janet asked Amara to email over her doctor's documentation and a detailed list of safe foods. She promised to share everything with the head chef and create a specific plan for each meal during the retreat. 2 days later, Amara received a comprehensive email from Janet. The resort had developed a customized meal plan for the entire week. breakfast options that were both safe and delicious, lunch alternatives that wouldn't make her feel left out during business meetings, dinner choices that looked just as elegant as what everyone else would be eating. The email even included photos of similar dishes they had prepared for other guests with allergies. Everything looked amazing. Amara forwarded the information to her assistant and her doctor, both of whom were impressed with the thoroughness. "They really seem to know what they're doing," her assistant commented. "This looks like 5-star treatment." Her doctor was equally pleased. "This level of attention to detail is exactly what you need. It looks like they understand the seriousness of your condition." As the weeks passed, Amara felt increasingly confident about the retreat. The business agenda was solid, the attendees were confirmed, and now her personal concerns about food were handled. She could focus entirely on what mattered most: securing the deals that would take her company to the next level. The night before leaving for the resort, Amara packed carefully. Business attire for meetings, casual clothes for evening networking, and her emergency medication just in case. She also packed a few safe snacks, not because she expected to need them, but because her doctor had recommended always having backup options. Her husband helped her load the car. "You seem more relaxed than I expected," he observed. "The resort really put my mind at ease," she replied. "I was worried this was going to be a week of stress and hunger, but they've planned everything perfectly." Now standing in front of the resort's impressive entrance, Amara felt ready for anything. The doorman greeted her warmly, and a concierge immediately appeared to help with her luggage. "Dr. Thompson, welcome to Grandview Resort. We've been expecting you." The check-in process was smooth and efficient. Her suite was exactly as advertised, spacious and elegant with a perfect view of the lake. The welcome packet included a personalized note from Janet, confirming that all her dietary arrangements were in place and that the kitchen staff was prepared for her arrival. As Amara unpacked, she thought about how well everything was starting. Her team would begin arriving tomorrow, and the first official dinner was scheduled for tomorrow evening. According to Janet's plan, that meal would feature herb-crusted chicken with roasted vegetables, prepared in a completely separate area of the kitchen to avoid any allergen exposure. She looked out the window at the peaceful lake and smiled. Sometimes, being proactive and communicating clearly really did pay off. This retreat was going to be exactly what her company needed, and she wouldn't have to sacrifice her health to make it happen. Tomorrow would bring the real test, but for tonight, Amara felt optimistic and grateful. The resort had promised to take care of her, and she had every reason to believe they would keep that promise. The first morning at Grandview Resort started beautifully. Amara woke up refreshed and ready for the day ahead. Her team members had arrived the evening before, and everyone seemed impressed with the accommodations. The networking dinner had gone well, though Amara had kept it simple with just a light salad since the official catered meals weren't starting until today. She dressed carefully in a navy suit and headed down to the main dining room for breakfast. The space was stunning, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake and elegant table settings that screamed luxury. Several of her team members were already seated, chatting over coffee and pastries. "Good morning, Dr. Thompson," called out David, her head of development. "This place is incredible. I think we're all going to have trouble focusing on work with views like this." Amara smiled and approached the breakfast buffet. According to the plan Janet had emailed her, there should be a special section set aside with her allergen-free options. She looked around but didn't immediately see anything marked specifically for her. A young server approached her table. "Good morning. Can I get you some coffee?" "Yes, thank you. I'm Dr. Thompson. I believe your catering manager, Janet, arranged some special breakfast items for me." The server looked confused. "Special items? I'm not sure what you mean. Let me check with someone." Amara felt the first flutter of concern but tried to stay positive. It was early, and maybe the information just hadn't been communicated to all the staff yet. The server returned a few minutes later with an older woman who introduced herself as the morning shift supervisor. "I'm sorry, but I don't have any information about special dietary arrangements," the supervisor said. "Janet doesn't work mornings, so I'm not sure what you're referring to. But our buffet has lots of options. I'm sure you can find something that works." Amara's stomach sank. but she maintained her professional composure. I have severe food allergies. Janet and I worked out a detailed plan week's egg. Oh, there should be documentation in your system. The supervisor looked genuinely apologetic, but also a bit overwhelmed. I'll try to track down some information, but for now, maybe you could just pick from what's available? Most of our food is pretty basic. Looking at the buffet with new eyes, Amara realized how challenging this was going to be. The scrambled eggs were likely made with butter. The bread obviously contained gluten. Even the fruit salad might have been cut with utensils that touched allergens. Nothing was labeled, and there was no way to know how anything had been prepared. She ended up with black coffee and a plain banana, watching her colleagues enjoy elaborate breakfast spreads while she tried not to feel frustrated. This wasn't the start she had hoped for. "Everything okay?" asked Lisa, her marketing director, noticing Amara's sparse plate. "Just keeping it light this morning," Amara replied, not wanting to create drama on the first day. Big day ahead, but as the morning progressed, her optimism continued to fade. During the coffee break, she tracked down Janet's office, only to learn that Janet was off-site at another event and wouldn't return until later in the week. The temporary catering coordinator, a man named Robert, seemed completely unaware of any special arrangements. "I have the general catering order for your group," he said, shuffling through papers on his desk. "But I don't see anything about individual dietary needs. Are you sure this was arranged through our department?" Amara felt her professional patience being tested. "Yes, I'm absolutely sure. I have emails confirming everything. Your colleague Janet spent over an hour planning this with me." Robert shrugged. "Well, Janet handles a lot of events. Maybe there was some miscommunication. For lunch today, we're serving salmon with rice, pilaf, and vegetables. That sounds pretty healthy. The salmon could be cooked in butter. The rice might contain gluten-based seasonings, and I'd need to know exactly how the vegetables are prepared," Amara explained. "This is why we planned everything in advance. Look, lady, I don't know what to tell you. The kitchen is already prepping for lunch. We can't change the menu now for one person." The dismissive tone caught Amara off guard. She had expected some confusion, maybe even a delay in getting things sorted out. But the casual indifference was surprising, especially at a resort that marketed itself as providing premium customer service. Lunch proved to be another challenge. The salmon was indeed cooked in butter, and when Amara asked if a piece could be prepared differently, the server looked at her like she was asking for something unreasonable. "The chef is really busy right now," the server explained. "Maybe you could just eat around the sauce?" Amara watched her colleagues enjoy their meals while she picked at a dry salad with no dressing. Since none of the available options were safe for her, she found herself calculating how many energy bars she had packed in her luggage. The afternoon business sessions went well, but Amara's focus kept drifting to her growing hunger and frustration. This wasn't just about being picky or preferring certain foods. Her doctor had been very clear about the potential consequences of exposure to her allergens. At best, she'd experience painful digestive issues. At worst, she could end up in the emergency room. During the afternoon break, she decided to try a different approach. She found Robert again and asked if she could speak directly with the head chef. "He's pretty busy preparing for tonight's dinner," Robert said without looking up from his clipboard. "But I can pass along a message. I really need to speak with him directly. This is a medical issue, not a preference." Robert sighed heavily as if she was creating an enormous inconvenience. "Fine, but he's not going to be happy about being interrupted." The head chef, a large man with food stains on his apron, looked annoyed from the moment he emerged from the kitchen. "What's the problem now?" Amara explained the situation again, mentioning the advanced planning, the medical necessity, and her hope that they could find a solution for the remaining days of the retreat. "Listen, we run a professional kitchen here," the chef said curtly. "We're not a hospital cafeteria. We prepare what's on the menu, and we do it well. If you can't eat what we're serving, maybe you should have thought about that before booking a resort." The comment stung, both because of its dismissive tone and because it completely ignored everything she had just explained about the advance arrangements. Around them, other guests were beginning to notice the conversation, and Amara felt embarrassed to be having this discussion in public. "I understand you're busy," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. But accommodating food allergies is pretty standard in the hospitality industry. I'm not asking for anything exotic. Standard? The chef laughed, but not in a friendly way. Lady, what's standard is guests who appreciate good food instead of making demands. We've got 100 other people to feed, and they're all perfectly happy with what we're serving. Several of Amara's colleagues had wandered over, drawn by the raised voices. She could see the concern in their faces, and felt mortified that her personal issue was becoming a spectacle during their important business retreat. Perhaps we could discuss this privately, she suggested. There's nothing to discuss, the chef replied. You either eat what we serve, or you don't. That's how restaurants work. As he walked away, Amara stood there feeling stunned and humiliated. The resort staff's attitude was completely different from what she had experienced during the planning phase. The promises of personalized service and careful attention to her needs had evaporated. David approached her cautiously. Is everything all right? It looked pretty heated over there. Just working out some menu details, Amara replied, trying to minimize the situation. Nothing that can't be sorted out. But privately, she was beginning to wonder if that was true. The staff's dismissive attitude suggested this wasn't just a miscommunication or temporary confusion. It felt like they simply didn't care about accommodating her needs, despite the advance arrangements and the medical necessity. That evening, as her colleagues enjoyed an elaborate dinner of steak and lobster, Amara sat with another plain salad and a piece of grilled chicken that she had specifically requested to be prepared without any seasonings or sauces. Even then, she could taste something that might have been a marinade, making her nervous about potential reactions. As she watched her team laugh and bond over the shared meal, Amara felt isolated and frustrated. This retreat was supposed to be about bringing everyone together and building momentum for the company's next phase. Instead, she was becoming distracted by the basic challenge of finding safe food to eat. The worst part was the growing suspicion that the staff's attitude might not be entirely about the inconvenience of her dietary needs. Something about their dismissive tone and unwillingness to find solutions felt familiar in a way that made her uncomfortable. But she pushed those thoughts aside, hoping that tomorrow would bring better communication and more cooperation. By the third day of the retreat, Amara's patience was wearing dangerously thin. Despite multiple conversations with different staff members, nothing had improved. If anything, the situation seemed to be getting worse. The kitchen staff appeared increasingly irritated whenever she asked questions about ingredients, and the servers had started avoiding her table altogether. She had managed to survive on energy bars from her luggage, plain salads, and the occasional piece of unseasoned grilled chicken, but her energy was flagging, and the constant stress of wondering what she could safely eat was taking a toll on her ability to focus during the important business meetings. Her team had started to notice. During the morning session, she found herself losing track of the presentation details, her mind distracted by hunger and frustration. When one of the potential investors asked her a direct question about market projections, she had to ask him to repeat it. "Are you feeling all right?" asked Teresa, her chief financial officer, during a break. "You seem a bit off today." "Just tired," Amara replied, though they both knew that wasn't the whole truth. Amara was known for her sharp focus and commanding presence in business settings. The fact that she seemed distracted was unusual enough to be concerning. The lunch situation that day pushed things toward a breaking point. The main course was a seafood pasta dish that Amara obviously couldn't eat due to her shellfish allergy. When she approached the buffet, she found the same limited options as previous days: pre-dressed salads that might contain allergens, bread with obvious gluten, and side dishes prepared with unknown ingredients. She spotted Robert, the temporary catering coordinator, and decided to try one more time to find a reasonable solution. "Excuse me, Robert, is there any possibility of getting something simple prepared without the seafood? Maybe just the pasta with olive oil?" Robert looked up from his clipboard with an expression of barely concealed annoyance. "Not this again. We've been through this. The kitchen is busy and we can't make special orders for every guest who doesn't like what we're serving." "This isn't about not liking the food," Amara said, working to keep her voice level. "I explained that I have documented medical allergies. I could have a serious reaction." Look, if it's that serious, maybe you should eat somewhere else. There are plenty of restaurants in town. The suggestion was so dismissive and impractical that Amara felt her composure starting to crack. I'm hosting a business retreat for 15 people. I can't leave in the middle of meetings to drive to town for every meal. Their conversation was taking place near the buffet, and other guests were beginning to take notice. Amara could see some of her colleagues glancing over with concerned expressions. This was exactly the kind of scene she had hoped to avoid. That's not really my problem, Robert continued. We serve what we serve. If that doesn't work for you, you'll have to figure something else out. Before Amara could respond, the head chef emerged from the kitchen, apparently drawn by the discussion. His arrival immediately made the situation more tense. What's going on out here? He demanded, looking directly at Amara as if she was causing trouble. I was just asking if there might be a simple alternative to the seafood dish, Amara explained. Something that would be safe for my allergies. The chef's expression darkened. Are you serious right now? We've been dealing with your complaints for 3 days. Do you have any idea how a kitchen works? We prep hundreds of meals. We don't have time to play around with special orders because one guest is being difficult. The word difficult hung in the air like an accusation. Amara felt her face flush with embarrassment and anger. Around them, the dining room had gotten noticeably quieter, as other guests paused their conversations to watch the confrontation. I'm not being difficult, she said, her voice rising slightly despite her efforts to stay calm. I have legitimate medical needs that were supposed to be accommodated. I have documentation from my doctor. Oh, here we go with the medical documentation again, the chef said mockingly. Everyone's got some special condition these days. You know what we used to call people like you? Picky eaters. The comment hit Amara like a slap. The dismissive tone, the complete disregard for her health concerns, and the public humiliation were overwhelming. But it was the phrase, people like you, that made something click in her mind. She had heard that tone before, in other contexts, and suddenly the pattern of treatment made horrible sense. People like me? She repeated, her voice now carrying a sharp edge. The chef seemed to realize he had said something inappropriate, but instead of backing down, he doubled down. People who come to a nice place like this and then complain about everything. People who think the world should revolve around their special needs. We run a business here, not a charity. By now, the confrontation had drawn the attention of nearly everyone in the dining room. Amara could see her colleagues watching with expressions ranging from shock to embarrassment. The potential investors she was trying to impress were witnessing her being publicly dressed down by resort staff. I paid the same rates as everyone else here, Amara said, her professional training helping her maintain some composure even as her anger built. I arranged these accommodations weeks in advance. I provided medical documentation. I've been nothing but polite and patient, even when it became clear that none of the promised arrangements were in place. Well, maybe next time you should choose a resort that specializes in whatever special treatment you think you deserve, the chef shot back. This is a normal place for normal people who can eat normal food. The words special treatment and normal people felt loaded with implications that went far beyond dietary accommodations. Amara looked around the dining room and realized that she was one of only 2 black guests in the entire space. The other was a young man who appeared to be dining alone, and he was watching the confrontation with an expression of uncomfortable recognition. Robert, perhaps sensing that things had gone too far, tried to intervene. Maybe we should continue this conversation somewhere private. But the chef wasn't finished. No, I think everyone should hear this. We work hard to provide excellent service to our guests, but we can't perform miracles for people who show up with a list of demands and expect us to change everything just for them. Demands? Amara's voice was now loud enough that the entire dining room could hear her clearly. Asking for food that won't make me sick is not a demand. It's a basic accommodation that any professional establishment should be able to provide. Professional? The chef laughed harshly. Lady, you want professional? Professional is not making a scene in front of other guests because you don't like what's on the menu. Professional is understanding that the world doesn't revolve around your personal preferences. The exchange had crossed a line from which there was no return. Amara realized that no amount of explanation or patience was going to change the staff's attitude. They had decided she was a problem customer, and they were treating her accordingly. What made it worse was the growing certainty that their dismissive treatment wasn't just about the inconvenience of her dietary needs. The tone, the language, the complete unwillingness to find any accommodation, it all felt too familiar. She had experienced this kind of dismissal before, in other contexts, and she recognized the pattern. "You know what?" she said, her voice now carrying the authority that had made her successful in business. "This conversation is over, but this situation is far from resolved." As she walked away from the buffet, leaving the chef and Robert standing there, Amara felt a mixture of humiliation and determination. Her colleagues followed her with their eyes, and she could hear the whispered conversations starting up around the room. David approached her table cautiously. "That was pretty intense. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," she said, though they both knew that wasn't true. "Just dealing with some service issues." But as she sat there, looking at her empty plate while everyone else enjoyed their lunch, Amara was already thinking ahead. The chef had made a serious mistake. He had assumed she was just another guest who would tolerate poor treatment and move on. He had no idea who he was dealing with or what resources she had at her disposal. That afternoon, while her team continued with their scheduled meetings, Amara made some phone calls. By evening, she had gathered information that would change everything. The resort's dismissive staff was about to learn that some guests have more influence than others, and that treating people poorly can have serious consequences. The chef thought he had ended the conversation that day in the dining room, but he was wrong. The real conversation was just beginning, and this time Amara would be the one setting the terms. That evening, while her colleagues enjoyed dinner and networking drinks, Amara sat in her suite making phone calls. The view of the lake that had seemed so peaceful just days earlier now felt like the calm before a storm. She had spent the afternoon doing research, and what she discovered had transformed her frustration into something much more focused and powerful. The first call was to her assistant, back in Los Angeles. "Kelly, I need you to pull some files for me. Everything we have on Grandview Resort's parent company, Luxury Hospitality Group. Contracts, correspondence, financial relationships, everything." "Is something wrong with the retreat?" Kelly asked, immediately picking up on the tension in Amara's voice. "You could say that. Just get me the information as quickly as possible. And Kelly, this stays between us for now." While she waited for the files, Amara made her second call to her company's legal department, not because she was planning to sue, but because she wanted to understand exactly what leverage she might have. The conversation was enlightening. Her third call was to her business partner and co-founder, James, who was back in Los Angeles handling the company's day-to-day operations. "Amara, how's the retreat going? Are the investors impressed?" "The retreat is fine, but we have a situation here that you need to know about." She explained the events of the past 3 days, being careful to stick to facts rather than emotions. James was quiet for a long moment after she finished. "Are you serious? They're treating you like this after everything we've done for their parent company?" That was exactly what Amara had been thinking about. Her production company didn't just have a casual business relationship with Luxury Hospitality Group. Over the past 5 years, they had produced promotional content, corporate videos, and even a documentary series featuring several properties in the chain. The financial relationship was worth several $1,000,000 annually. More importantly, Amara's company had significant influence in the entertainment and hospitality industries. Their productions reached millions of viewers, and their endorsement or criticism of brands could have real impact. The resort staff treating her poorly had no idea they were antagonizing someone with the power to affect their reputation on a much larger scale. "James, I want you to reach out to our contacts at LHG corporate headquarters. Don't mention specifics yet, just let them know I'm having some concerns about service standards at one of their properties. See if you can set up a call with someone in senior management." "Consider it done. Amara, are you thinking about pulling our business from them?" I'm thinking about a lot of things right now. Let's see how they handle this situation when they realize who they're dealing with. Kelly's email arrived within the hour, and the information confirmed what Amara had suspected. Her company's relationship with Luxury Hospitality Group was more extensive and valuable than she had even remembered. Beyond the production contracts, they had collaborated on marketing campaigns, provided influencer services, and even invested in one of LHG's newer properties. But more interesting was information about Grandview Resort specifically. According to the financial reports Kelly had found, the property had been struggling with occupancy rates and had recently received negative reviews on several travel websites. Comments mentioned poor service, inflexible staff, and an unwelcoming atmosphere. Amara wasn't the first guest to experience problems here. Armed with this information, she felt a shift in her perspective. This wasn't just about her personal treatment anymore. The resort had a pattern of poor service that was affecting their business performance. The staff's attitude toward her was apparently part of a larger problem that the parent company needed to address. The next morning, Amara dressed carefully in her most authoritative business suit. She had received a message that James had successfully arranged a call with the regional director of Luxury Hospitality Group for that afternoon. But first, she had a meeting with the resort's general manager. Getting that meeting had required persistence. When she first called the manager's office, his assistant tried to brush her off with promises that someone would look into her concerns. But when Amara mentioned that she needed to discuss her company's ongoing business relationship with LHG, the assistant's tone changed immediately. "Oh, you have a corporate account with us? Let me check the general manager's schedule." Suddenly, there was availability for a meeting that morning. The general manager, a thin man named William who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, greeted her with forced enthusiasm. "Dr. Thompson, I understand you've had some concerns about our service. I want to assure you that we take guest satisfaction very seriously." Amara sat down across from his desk and opened her portfolio. "William, I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me. I think there are some things you need to know about the situation." She laid out the timeline methodically. The advance, planning with Janet, the documented medical needs, the complete failure to provide any of the promised accommodations, and the increasingly hostile treatment from the catering staff. William nodded along, occasionally making notes, his expression growing more concerned as the story progressed. "I'm very sorry to hear about these service failures," he said when she finished. "There's obviously been some miscommunication in our catering department. I'll speak with the staff immediately and make sure your needs are properly accommodated for the rest of your stay." "I appreciate that," Amara replied. "But I think this situation goes beyond simple miscommunication. The way your staff has treated me suggests some deeper issues with training and attitudes." She paused, letting that sink in before continuing. "William, I don't think you're aware of who I am or what my relationship is with your parent company." The manager looked confused. "I know you're hosting a corporate retreat. Beyond that," Amara slid a document across the desk. It was a summary of her company's business relationship with Luxury Hospitality Group, including contract values and collaboration history. William's eyes widened as he read. "Dr. Thompson, I had no idea. If I had known about your corporate relationship, this situation would never have—" "That's exactly the problem," Amara interrupted. "The level of service shouldn't depend on who the guest is or how much money they spend with your company. Every guest deserves basic respect and accommodation, especially when they have documented medical needs." William was now looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Of course, you're absolutely right. I'll address this immediately with the entire staff." Sure you will. But there's something else you should know. This afternoon, I have a scheduled call with your regional director to discuss this situation. Depending on how this is handled, it could affect our entire business relationship with LHG." The color drained from William's face. Amara could practically see him calculating the potential financial impact of losing a multi-million-dollar corporate account over dietary accommodations that should have cost the resort almost nothing to provide. "Dr. Thompson, please let me make this right. Whatever you need, we'll provide it. I'll personally oversee every meal for the rest of your stay. I'll have a conversation with the catering staff about professional service standards. It's not just about my meals anymore, Amara said firmly. It's about the attitudes and training that led to this situation. How many other guests have been treated dismissively? How many people have left here feeling unwelcome because your staff decided their needs weren't worth accommodating? William was clearly realizing the scope of the problem. What would you like to see happen? I want the staff members who were involved in this situation to understand that their behavior was unacceptable. I want training implemented to ensure this doesn't happen to other guests. And I want a formal review of your accommodation policies to make sure they're actually being followed. Absolutely. Anything else? Amara leaned back in her chair. I want this resolved before my call with your regional director this afternoon. Because if I have to explain to LHG Corporate why their property is providing discriminatory service to their business partners, it's going to be a very different conversation than if I can tell them you've already addressed the problem. Within 2 hours, everything changed. The head chef who had been so dismissive was nowhere to be seen. Robert, the temporary catering coordinator, appeared at Amara's suite with a formal apology and a detailed plan for accommodating her dietary needs for the remainder of the retreat. Dr. Thompson, I want to personally apologize for the confusion and poor service you've experienced. We've reviewed your original arrangements with Janet and everything will be implemented exactly as planned. By lunchtime, Amara had a beautifully prepared meal that met all her dietary requirements, served by staff who were suddenly very attentive to her needs. The change was so dramatic that her colleagues noticed immediately. Wow, they really turned things around, observed David. Your meal looks amazing today. The call with the regional director that afternoon was brief and cordial. William had apparently gotten there first, explaining that there had been some service issues that were being addressed immediately. The regional director apologized profusely and assured Amara that the situation would be used as a learning opportunity for the entire property. Dr. Thompson, I want you to know how much we value our relationship with your company. This is absolutely not the standard of service we expect from our properties. That evening, as Amara finally enjoyed a properly prepared dinner with her colleagues, she reflected on how quickly things had changed once the right people understood the situation. The staff's attitude toward her had transformed completely, but she couldn't help wondering how they treated other guests who didn't have corporate leverage. The shift in power had been swift and decisive, but it also highlighted a troubling reality about how respect and accommodation often depended on influence rather than basic human dignity. Still, she had used her position to create change that would hopefully benefit other guests in the future. As she looked around at her team, laughing and bonding over the shared meal, Amara realized that sometimes the most important business deals weren't about money or contracts. Sometimes they were about using your influence to ensure that everyone received the respect and dignity they deserved. The transformation at Grandview Resort was remarkable to witness. What had been 3 days of frustration and dismissive treatment suddenly became a showcase of attentive, professional service. The new catering team seemed to understand that Amara's dietary needs weren't requests to be grudgingly fulfilled, but requirements to be handled with care and expertise. For the final 3 days of the retreat, every meal was perfectly prepared. The kitchen staff used separate preparation areas, carefully labeled ingredients, and even created beautiful presentations that made her allergen-free meals look just as elegant as everyone else's. The servers were knowledgeable about every ingredient and cooking method, answering her questions with confidence rather than irritation. "This is incredible," said Teresa during the final evening's dinner. "Your meals have been gorgeous all week. I'm almost jealous of how personalized everything looks." Amara smiled, appreciating the irony. It really is amazing what's possible when people put effort into accommodating others. But even as she enjoyed the improved service, Amara couldn't stop thinking about the bigger picture. The staff's ability to suddenly provide excellent accommodation proved that they had always been capable of meeting her needs. The problem had never been logistics or kitchen limitations. It had been attitude and priority. On the last morning of the retreat, William, the general manager, requested a private meeting with her. When she arrived at his office, she found him looking considerably more relaxed than he had during their previous conversation. "Dr. Thompson, I wanted to update you on the changes we've implemented based on your feedback he said, gesturing for her to sit down. First, I want you to know that the chef and catering coordinator who treated you poorly are no longer with the resort. Amara raised an eyebrow. You fired them? The chef was terminated, yes. His behavior was completely unacceptable and violated our service standards. Robert was transferred to a different position where he'll receive additional training before working with guests again. While Amara felt vindicated, she also found herself thinking about the broader implications. What about preventing this from happening to other guests? That's exactly what I wanted to discuss with you, William replied, pulling out a thick folder. We've developed a comprehensive plan based on this situation. He outlined the changes they were implementing. All staff would receive mandatory training on dietary accommodations and respectful guest service. The resort was creating clear protocols for handling special requests, with backup systems to ensure information didn't get lost when key staff members were unavailable. They were also establishing a guest advocate position, someone specifically responsible for ensuring that accommodation requests were properly fulfilled. We're also reviewing our hiring practices and guest service training programs, William continued. This situation made us realize that we need to do better at instilling respect for all guests, regardless of their background or needs. Amara appreciated the thoroughness of the response, but she had learned enough about corporate promises to want something more concrete. These changes sound comprehensive. How will you ensure they're actually implemented and maintained? That's where I was hoping you might help us, William said carefully. Your company has expertise in training and development. Would you be interested in consulting on our new service standards program? It was an interesting proposition. Rather than simply taking her business elsewhere, Amara could help create lasting change that would benefit future guests. After some discussion, they worked out an arrangement where her company would develop training materials and conduct workshops for the resort's staff. But Amara had one more requirement. I want this to be part of a broader initiative across all luxury hospitality group properties. This can't just be about fixing the problem here at Grandview. When she returned to Los Angeles, Amara found that word of the situation had already spread through her professional network. Not because she had shared details publicly, but because several of her colleagues from the retreat had been impressed by how she had handled the situation and the positive changes that resulted. You turned a really negative situation into something constructive, observed David during their first team meeting back in the office. A lot of people would have just left bad reviews and moved on. James, her business partner, had a different perspective. What happened to you was unacceptable, but the way you leveraged your position to create change was brilliant. You turned your influence into impact. Over the following months, Amara worked with Luxury Hospitality Group to develop training programs that were implemented across their entire chain. The sessions covered not just dietary accommodations, but broader issues of respectful service, unconscious bias, and inclusive hospitality practices. The feedback from guests at LHG properties began to improve noticeably. Online reviews mentioned better accommodation of special needs, more attentive service, and staff who seemed genuinely committed to ensuring all guests felt welcome. 6 months after the retreat, Amara received a call from the corporate office of Luxury Hospitality Group. Dr. Thompson, we wanted to share some data with you. Guest satisfaction scores across our properties have increased significantly since we implemented the new training programs. We're seeing particular improvement in areas related to dietary accommodations and inclusive service. But perhaps the most meaningful feedback came from individual guests. Amara received emails from people who had stayed at LHG properties and experienced dramatically better service for their food allergies, accessibility needs, and cultural requirements. One message from a family with an autistic child particularly touched her. We stayed at Grandview Resort last month, and the staff was amazing with our son's sensory needs and dietary restrictions. They even modified the lighting in the dining room when it was bothering him. The server told us they had received special training on accommodating different needs. We've never experienced service like that before. The changes at Grandview became a case study that other hotel chains began to emulate. Industry publications wrote articles about the resort's transformation, and Amara was invited to speak at hospitality conferences about inclusive service practices. But the impact went beyond the hospitality industry. Amara's experience had reinforced her belief in using influence responsibly. When you have power and resources, you have a choice. You can use them just to solve your own problems, or you can use them to create changes that benefit others who might not have the same advantages. A year later, Amara returned to Grandview Resort for another corporate retreat. The difference was remarkable not just in how she was treated, but in the overall atmosphere of the property. The staff seemed more confident and engaged, and she observed them providing thoughtful service to guests with various needs and backgrounds. During dinner on the first night, she watched a server patiently explain ingredient options to an elderly guest with dietary restrictions, and saw the kitchen accommodate a last-minute request for a child with food allergies. The level of care and attention was exactly what hospitality service should look like. Her assistant, who had accompanied her on this trip, made an observation that stuck with her. It's interesting how changing the culture around one issue ended up improving the service for everyone. The staff seems more attentive and caring across the board. That insight captured something important about the ripple effects of standing up for yourself and others. When you challenge systems that treat people poorly, the improvements often extend far beyond the original problem. As Amara looked around the dining room that night, seeing guests of different backgrounds and needs all receiving respectful, attentive service, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The frustration and humiliation she had experienced during that first retreat had been transformed into something much more valuable. She had learned that sometimes the most important victories aren't about winning a single battle, but about changing the conditions that created the battle in the first place. By refusing to accept poor treatment and using her influence strategically, she had helped create an environment where future guests wouldn't have to fight the same fights. The retreat concluded successfully, with several major business deals finalized and new partnerships established. But for Amara, the real success was knowing that her willingness to stand up for herself had created lasting change that would benefit countless other people who simply wanted to be treated with dignity and respect. Sometimes, the most meaningful business you can conduct has nothing to do with contracts or profit margins. Sometimes it's about using your position to ensure that everyone receives the basic respect and accommodation they deserve, regardless of who they are or how much influence they wield.